Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The 4 Benefits of Combining Traceability with Modern ERP. My name is Nick Mears, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Macola, a division of Exact. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you sharing some of it with us today. Now, that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First off, we have Bob Combs. In pre-sales, Bob is a seasoned professional with over 34 years of industry experience, 19 years with Exact. Prior to becoming a senior business consultant, Bob served as an Exact consulting manager and senior consultant for 10 years. He's held several industry positions in engineering, quality management, manufacturing, operations, and configuration management, and Bob is also a veteran of the U.S. Navy and is a certified ISO lead auditor. Next we have Steve Featherston. Steve's been with Exact for 4 years. Prior to that, Steve managed the implementation of Macola for many of Exact's customers. Prior to Exact, Steve for 16 years worked in 3 different companies. All using Macola, by the way. Before this, Steve owned his own business for 22 years in the consumer electronics industry. And last up, we have Russ Lesko. With over 25 years of experience in the operations, finance, and manufacturing world, Russ is a results-oriented, hands-on professional manager with exceptional ERP sales and implementation experience, utilizing an extensive quality, operations, and business process management background in diversified business environments. Russ has a keen ability to identify needs, implement, and re-engineer processes to improve and maintain a strong competitive advantage. So everyone on the panel, I appreciate you sharing your time with us, and everyone who's attending, looking forward to seeing you as well. Everyone's heard about the recall stories of last year. Chipotle, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's all had recalls. They're painful and highly visible. But it's not just food and beverage, though. Many different industries had issues with recalls. But there's a plus side. Traceability can help with that. It can help companies handle unpleasant but necessary parts of the business, such as recalls and regulatory compliance. In such a way, there's less negative impact on the company. So in this webinar, we just want to cover these 4 things. Know a product or component's location at any point in the supply chain, access quality data on a product, enable regulatory compliance, and find and communicate with consumers of the product. So traceability, it's not a new concept. It's one that's growing and in importance and complexity in the world of modern manufacturing. From one end of the supply chain to the other, and every point in between, product traceability creates efficiency, ensures quality, and enables regulatory compliance. But before I get too much farther, I actually wanted to ask Julie to kick off a poll here. I want to get your guys' feedback. So question, and if you can, go ahead and cast your vote. Want to know which is most important to trace to your organization. Okay, so it looks like the winner here is lot number registration. And then second, after that, serial number, that's 36 and 32%. And then we have a tie for third, batch number and certificate documentation, and then quality control specifications. Panel, what do you guys think? Any thoughts on the results of this poll?
That seemed to come out fairly predictable, Nick. I think lot number registration is pretty huge, and taking that down to, then possibly a batch that involved those lots, probably pretty predictable on a lot of the different health and safety areas that we see traceability needed for.
Okay. No, that's good. Actually, Steve, I'm glad you jumped in, because this takes us, and let's go ahead and close that poll out. Thank you, Julie. This takes us to this. It's actually a quote of yours, Steve, and I hope you're okay with me sharing it. Steve says traceability is becoming a very important need for our customers, and it's more than just for those in the food industry or those technical areas where it affects other people, because now we're seeing it in service in many other different types of industries. Requirements for tracking order processing from the initial quote through the manufacturing process to the delivery of the product is fast becoming a requirement for business software today. That's a great quote. And Steve, if you can, why don't you share a little bit more about what you mean with that, and kind of walk us through the 4 benefits of combining traceability with modern ERP.
Sure, not a problem. Thank you, Nick. 4 different areas that we find pretty important as far as traceability and being able to track a product either through your purchase cycle or through your manufacturing cycle, then again, shipment and out to the customer itself. One of them, which is pretty big, is knowing where a component's location is anywhere in your supply chain. So whether it's something that you're in the process of purchasing, you're inventorying, or you're producing inside of a product and then in turn shipping out to the end user, being able to quickly identify where that particular component is kind of huge. Second is to be able to access data on the product, and in this example we talk about quality data. So incoming inspection, maybe some test results that are related to a particular product, whether it's a measurement or an analysis of paint quality or food type inspection. All of this is something that people today really need to gather and be able to tie to the product inbound so they know what they have as they're producing it. Another area that's long been a challenge for people is knowing the source of where a product came from. Now, we can be talking about things that are related to health and safety, as I mentioned before. They could be a product that goes into an aircraft or a product that goes into a batch for making the best chocolate syrup in the world. But being able to identify some of these down to where the component came from gets pretty big, and in some of the aerospace industries or nuclear industries, we're seeing that go down to the level where they want to know not only who the product was sold from, what vendor supplied it, but then again what mine or farm may have produced that product in its origin. So it all plays a big part in both the health and safety industry side of it and also in just general product. Finding and communicating with customers is another aspect that I'm seeing pretty important. Even if you're not involved in health and safety and be concerned about tracking of what might be a potential recall, we do see that most of our clients recently, over the last 5 to 8 years, are asking for, I need visibility of where the product is. If a customer calls, where the order is it going out on time, what stage is it in my process, and how can I quickly get that information by just looking at a screen and pulling up that data. So that's kind of huge. Now, traceability also provides a fair amount of detail into other ends. We can look at, the end-to-end process of the supply chain like I explained, but you're also tracking information about shelf life and expiration dates. You're linking that information to batches that you may be producing of either, metal products or food products, whatever your industry happens to be. And to be able to, again, locate those products very quickly inside of your supply chain. So accurate insight into your stocking levels, aiding with compliance and regulatory statutes for both government and the customer side, helping out with warranty tracking and returns and inventory that might be coming back to you for being serviced or for quality issues, all plays a big part in it. Something that we need to monitor both where it went and if it came back and what you've done to it to be able to satisfy that customer's needs. So tracking RMAs through quality is huge there. You want to try to look towards preserving your company's reputation, being able to quickly get your customer the information that they need to be able to call them in event of potential recall and identify the sources and the people who are involved in the end product. All creates a better view of your company as a whole and your ability to respond to the changing needs of the industry. So what do we use to trace these elements? Inside of the system, we use natively serial numbers, batch numbers. We use lot number registrations. We tie expiration dates and purchase dates, arrival dates all to this. You want to be able to locate and tie your quality information, your certificates to it, any proof of testing be tied to the individual items down to the serial lot level of those items. All plays a big part in it, in addition to just being able to say to the customer, yeah, we've got your order, and it's due to go out on Tuesday as we predicted. Right now it's in production. So being able to trace the product, its materials, the finished good, and its deliverable customer is all a pretty big part in traceability. Now, I've mentioned some things about manufacturing. The other side of this may be a whole different direction. What about traceability on some of the financial aspects of things? If you need an approval to get something purchased, if you need an approval to, get a voucher put in for invoice and a new invoice approved, that's another side of traceability in the business that we try to satisfy with the Macola 10 solution, is being able to route a purchase request through the correct people to get the right approvals and have it end up at a purchasing agent's desk to be able to create the PO automatically and then in turn get the product in the door. So the note says here from Hayden, they've been using an AP processing method that's enabled them to have traceability and also almost a paperless solution for it, and they're probably about 1.5 to 2 years into using that to help them with their AP processing and approval methods.
And Steve, if I might add too, this is from Hayden, who is actually a metal fabricator. So this is an example of not just food and beverage, right? But traceability applies really to all industries as well.
Yeah, and not only in product, but also in your processes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to trace that you're doing your processes right, whether you're ISO certified or not. It's all become a big point in a lot of businesses today.
Excellent. Now, Steve, if you could just walk us through this last part here of this section, a few of the aspects to a successful traceability.
Well, all of these different aspects are elements that become part of traceability. And maybe you use all of these features, maybe you only use some of them. Certainly you can have traceability without having a multi-binned warehouse. But the modules that are inside of the system offer you the ability to kind of touch on these different elements that we're seeing here in the picture. So you look at inventory management, you look at business intelligence reporting and warehouse management. You want to be able to report on the details of your warehouse and what is the next batch that needs to be made out of what materials are the oldest in the warehouse or the most current to be hitting the production floor. The multi-bin control offers the availability of identifying exactly where that is in the warehouse. Lot and serial control play a big part in the expiration dates, the dates that you've got them in, and kind of organizing that out to the production floor. Manufacturing collecting of that data along with the costing of the product is our bottom element there. And then we have the whole side of what happens if you have a problem, if you've got something that was defective or something that was damaged in shipment or something that failed during the warranty period. Being able to track that efficiently is a major requirement, and we do that a lot with our workflow process and RMA functionality to that. And lastly is recall management. God forbid you actually do have a situation where you have a potential health or safety issue, and you want to be able to immediately identify where that product may have gone and where it came from. That's probably the whole topic of this conversation, is being able to track things forward and back from purchase to shipment throughout your business.
No, excellent, Steve. Thank you for that. And let's just keep moving on here, guys, and let's take a look at the supply chain. Russ has this coming up, but one of the things I wanted to highlight was that with the supply chain, traceability helps with visibility across the entire supply chain because it's because of consumers want to know what they're buying or how it was produced and when they can expect to get the finished goods. This is something that's driving the need to trace finished goods to the components from which they were sourced. Also, seeing the whole life cycle can also give insight and understanding into your entire business ecosystem. And as Russ is going to explain, from stock levels to transaction history, an organization can better manage complexity or take corrective actions should problems arise. But before we move on to that, I wanted to get your feedback again. And Julie, if you could, let's launch our second poll. Let's see what you guys vote. What is or could be the greatest benefit of incorporating traceability into your supply chain? Just go ahead and cast your vote. Is it insight into stock levels, activity and transaction history, managing complexity, improving channel relations, or even standardization? So the winner here is activity and transaction history throughout the supply chain. And then second's accurate insight into stock levels, and then managing complexity. Panel, what do you think? Any surprises, or is this what we anticipated?
I think this is what we anticipated with the activity and transaction history throughout the supply chain. Everyone needs to know that, followed up with the accurate insight into all usable stock levels. Those two are clearly the most important here, I believe. So.
Thanks, Bob.
I think the result also illustrates, a real sensitivity to the entire supply chain. Beginning with your vendors and ending with your customers. So well beyond the traditional view of a vendor and supplier, it's well beyond that, and it seems the results seem to indicate that.
Okay, well, thank you. Julie, if you could let's go ahead and close that out. And I wanted to read this quote here. This is from a Macola 10 customer as well. This is a food and beverage manufacturer. Heather Herringer of Nielsen Massey says, using an ERP system that incorporates a traceability function allows us to track raw materials from bean to customer. We can know which beans were used and which extracts, which bottles were used for packaging. Most importantly, which customers receive those bottles. This gives us peace of mind should issues ever arise. They can quickly and efficiently contact customers to solve problems. That's my favorite part, is not only can they track from bean to bottle, but also all the way through the customer. It gives them peace of mind. This insight does. So Russ, why don't you tell us about a few more of the benefits of traceability for the supply chain?
All right, thank you, Nick. And I think the quote from Heather really does tell the story about the supply chain, because she talks about going from bean to customer. Now, beans could be grown in different places of the world, of course, and then the vanilla flavoring, which is what that company produces, can end up in cereals and cookies that you feed your children. So it's truly an indication of what the dimensions of the supply chain are, from the source of the raw materials all the way through to the consumer themselves. The benefits of traceability is truly illustrated and clearly here, that the visibility, and with supply chain management in general, as I mentioned before, you're really looking at sharing information and making information available throughout the supply chain, which consists of your suppliers all the way up through and including your customers. What is available? What is product that is not yet expired and perhaps has exceeded its shelf life? What's usable? Those types of traceability capabilities with our lot control and serialization tracking capabilities, does provide the supply chain with the visibility. Visibility not just physically where the product is, but whether it is simply usable or not, in terms of shelf life and things of that nature. The other benefit is really just providing that insight into all of the transaction information, all the history and so forth, not just between customer and vendor and party A and party B in a transaction, but all the way through to your suppliers and your customers. As I just said, I think the quote from Heather was an illustration of how important it is for that entire supply chain to be able to have that kind of information available. A supply chain can be very complex, of course. There's a lot of things traditionally, where visibility gets lost and where did it go and who has it now and those types of things. So the complexity, of the supply chain and keeping that traceability intact all the way through the entire supply chain is something else that the traceability capabilities, in our software and just the mindset behind it will greatly improve. Where there is a large network of customers, worldwide customers and so forth, the ability to have, a supply chain and a customer network that extends and expands throughout the entire globe is truly very valuable. We're at that point now that we can have information available anywhere at any time in any place in the entire globe. And that is another benefit of what traceability can do to support supply chain management in general. And then we look at other ways in which technology comes into place as far as traceability goes. You've heard from my colleagues about the basic capabilities and benefits of traceability, but technology and barcoding and scanning and electronic data interchange and so forth have kept up and have been in step with the challenges of having product traced and having it be done in a simplified and accurate manner. If we just basically follow the supply chain, and as I said, it begins with suppliers. So in the case of Heather, knowing exactly where those components were sourced, where did that vanilla bean come from, and possibly even right down to the grower that produced that particular bean. And being able to track it all the way through to the work that Nielsen Massey does with it, all the way through to processing it, perhaps selling it to a retailer, and then ultimately retailers off to consumers. Never ever breaking that chain that is in place as far as traceability goes. So being able to really go from beginning to end. The consumers themselves, I mentioned before, as a consumer, you may not be obviously the direct customer, of the manufacturer, but you are the consumer of their product, particularly in the food industry. How much more do you want to know before you put it on your breakfast table, about that product and where it came from and what's in it and how it was produced and so forth. So with the supply chain management tools that are available in all software systems, but especially ours, with having that global access to information instantaneously helps to provide all that information the supply chain needs, whether you're a consumer, whether you are a distributor or a retailer, but having it all available to you, literally, at an instant when needed. Companies themselves, every company has to improve. They have to stay competitive. Their customer relationship or relations come into play. I think Nick mentioned Chipotle, and look at how they've had to try to recover from a relationship standpoint, all because of these issues, of food quality. They, as a company, it's been incredible that they've been able to manage up to this point of restoring their credibility, because a lot of it can get lost very quickly and very deeply, and it takes a long time to recover from things like that. So traceability does put companies in a position of being more proactive as opposed to reactive, after something happens. This particular quote from some guy named Russ Lesko talked a little bit more about that business of the technology, that also has become a big part of managing and maintaining traceability. We see a lot in the area of wireless barcode scanning. It obviously ensures that all of the records that need to be kept as product goes through the supply chain are recorded. They're recorded instantaneously. They're recorded without anybody having to keystroke and potentially make errors with it. So the information is captured and captured in the most efficient, most reliable, and most accurate way possible.
Well, this Russ Lesko guy sounds like a pretty sharp fellow.
All right, well, let's go on to the next slide before we get into a debate about that.
And just so the audience knows, this is not a picture of Russ. It's someone else. Didn't want there to be any confusion there.
Okay.
Mobile.
But as you can see, in going mobile, if you've been acquainted with many of our product technology roadmap discussions and presentations, you know that mobility has become a major part, of the direction of Macola. It's a big part of our latest release of Macola 10, making things more tablet friendly and so forth. But from the standpoint of going mobile, it's not just, again, the ability to view this information and view it instantaneously, quite literally from wherever you physically are at any given time, as long as you're not driving a car, of course. But you'll be able to obviously see that information that you need right on your device when you need to, as well as mobility also being used as a main vehicle to be able to capture that very important information. The chain of ownership, and so forth, as things move from this point to that point in that complex supply chain. You don't want anything falling through the cracks. You don't want to spend a lot of time figuring it out what happened between step 2 and step 3, and not being able to deal with solving the problem until you find out what happened in that period of time. Technology is a main way to make sure nothing literally falls through the cracks. And as you can see, ultimately the end game would be to ensure that the timeliness, the instant update of information, the accuracy of it, and the availability of it when the need arises.
Well, thank you, Russ. I appreciate you walking us through that and talking about some of the benefits of mobile. And next up here we have regulations and quality, and Bob's going to lead us on this. But before we do, it's one thing to note is that it's important to know the source or location of a specific product or component. Traceability is even more critical when it comes to maintaining quality. And as Russ said, having issues with quality can cause major problems. One of the most critical issues is, particularly in pharmaceutical and food, is meeting compliance requirements. While some companies have adopted fully integrated traceability systems, many, they could be small and even mid-sized companies, still attempt to use other means like spreadsheets or paper, the non-integrated, and they try to create these traceability reports from the data collected via these means. It is difficult to maintain that and keep it in real time. So one of the things Bob's going to talk about is regulations and quality. But before, Julie, if you could, let's conduct our last poll here. And this is the last one, guys. Want to hear what you think in regards to regulations. Which benefit of traceability would or does provide the greatest value to your organization? Lot control, serial control, document management, reporting? Okay, Julie. Let's go ahead and close the poll out. By the way, it was tied there for most of it. And then at the very end, it looks like a lot control pulled ahead at 39%. Close behind those serial control. And then document management was third, and then reporting for last. Panel, any thoughts on the result, this close contest here?
I would have thought that document management and reporting would have been higher due to the fact that, in regards to regulations, that's reporting and document management are very, very important in finding data quickly, making sure that the data is accurate, and so on.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I probably agree with Bob. That's a little bit of a surprise. I would have expected reporting on this to be a little stronger.
Well, Julie, if you could go ahead and close that out. And thanks everyone for participating in our last and final poll there. But Bob, before I hand off, just wanted to show a quote. This is a quote of yours. You made a while back. And you said traceability is key to quality inspections and meeting product specifications. Traceability could include corrective actions or nonconformances and tracking those inside of an application, meeting regulatory requirements. I think the key here is traceability is key to quality inspections and meeting the regulatory requirements, both of which, Bob, I believe you're going to tell us a little bit about.
Great. Well, I do appreciate it, Nick, and good afternoon and or good morning, depending on where you are this afternoon. Today I wanted to use a few example regulations and quality standards that we have seen in the Macola world to discuss why we believe that Macola 10 could help you with traceability requirements, particularly in the form of lot control, serial control, document management, and reporting that was previously mentioned in the poll that we just presented. And in particularly as it relates to reporting and the Macola 10 application, assignment of items for lot and serial control, and being able to use reports like the serial lot trace to obtain vital information that should and could have effects on these requirements. A few of the regulations that are very, very, very important to manufacturers that are in these particular industries are the ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms regulations, the 3 TG, which is a conflict of minerals, and also the 21 CFR Part 11, which controls FDA regulations on electronic records and electronic signatures. Diving a little bit more into these, basically all of these have key requirements that need to be met, and there's a certain theme that my colleagues have actually spoke about previously here as far as identification and receipt and tracking of various product and also document as in fact they come into your supply chain and into your system. ITAR itself is controlled by an organization called the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms. And basically what it does is it tracks handguns and rifles, etc., as far as lots and serial numbers that are assigned to various armed parts. And we all know that arms are dangerous and or they are things that actually could cause harm and a variety of other things. And that's why, in fact, this particular requirement is very, very important. Also, along with that is of importance is audits and record keeping. So you see another theme there of making sure that records are kept adequately, whether or not those are kept manually or electronically, and basically the easier way of doing this is certainly to keep records electronically so they can be retrieved very, very quickly. And then audits behind that to make sure that the records are being kept in an efficient and effective manner. As far as violations and fines, a lot of the regulations that are out there carry those particular fines and penalties with them if, in fact, you don't follow the regulations themselves. I know myself as being involved with the ITAR and being in that particular industry, I've seen various companies that have been levied very, very high fines in this regard. As far as the 3 TG or the conflict minerals is concerned, also record keeping is key for various minerals as far as lots that are used of those minerals in particular serial numbers and being able to track those adequately and efficiently through the entire process, along with, both the internal and the supplier documented audits, that are required by governmental standards that are notated in the Dodd-Frank Act that was enacted several years ago. The 21 CFR, Part 11, is having to do with FDA regulations. Of course, tracking those electronic requirements, including lot control, and having those inspection records in place in order to make sure that when, in fact, audits do occur and or recalls occur, you have that information at your fingertips. As far as quality standards, there are various quality standards that are noted, that can be noted today. Various industry and quality standards and or quality assurance standards having to do with ISO 9000 series standards, whether or not it's the 9000 2015, which are fundamentals and vocabulary, or the ISO 9001 2015, which are the requirements where most of the meat of that 9000 series standard is. There is a particular clause, 8.5.2, that discusses identification and traceability itself, looking at the status of outputs and with the respect of monitoring and measuring those requirements throughout the production and the service processes themselves, and or the control of unique identification of those outputs and making sure that that traceability is documented through the necessary records that ultimately enable traceability itself. Along with the ISO 9004-2009, which is sparking continuous improvement, and the 19011-2011, or the guidelines for auditing and managing the management systems themselves. As far as ISO 31000 is concerned, risk management, this provides management and others with guidelines for risk assessments, and in this case, it pertains to traceability and the risks related to not having the necessary and or required systems in place. So certainly, if you want to look up a couple of these standards, you can do that certainly after this call and or when, in fact, you have a chance to review this webinar. Other standards that relate to quality management and quality assurance are the ISO 14011, the environmental management standards, or the control of records for environmental conditions, procedures for identifying the storage and protection and retrieval and the retention and disposition, of those environmental records themselves, whether or not those environmental conditions are concerning humidity or temperature or a variety of other things. Those have to be recorded in accordance with this particular environmental standard, if in fact they relate to your particular industry. And then the last one that I'll mention is a hazardous analysis and critical control point and the prerequisite program, which basically controls measurements across various food applications and processes that are aimed and maintained for safe and hygiene and other environmental controls. As far as traceability and quality, some of the key system recommendations that are generically recommended, as they are referenced in the ISO 9001-2015 in clause 85.2 and other clauses of that standard, have to do with output identification, the process phase, the traceable identification, and also internal and external audits. Having to do with output identification, especially in a production environment, this should include, as my colleagues have said, the receipt of raw material, components, and or subassemblies through the entire process stage. Any thing in this particular process, whether or not you're dealing with shop floor or production order processing, and or the final storage of the product, and picking and also shipping of the product should also be maintained. What this means is, and what this concerns, are both the physical markings of the item and or the record keeping of the lot traceability and or serialized traceability of the item itself, and whether or not that's identified on travelers, whether or not it's identified electronically, or so on down the line. You can also reference Article 8.7, the control of non-conforming outputs within the ISO series of standards. As far as process stages themselves, you know, it's pretty reasonably straightforward in fully automated environments, but other processes, it really means that you should be recording inspection criteria and also inspection results and those particular lot numbers and or serial numbers through each one of those processes, as in fact the assembly moves through all of the required processes that are out there. And then the traceable identification, as far as that is concerned, it can be different from industry to industry and or by company by company. Basically, aerospace and pharmaceutical and automotive and other industries have various types of traceable requirements that are out there, and or it can be based on risk and or economic considerations, depending on whether or not you really need traceability or not, if it's dictated by a standard, by a regulation, and or by your particular company itself. This can also be looked at by looking at 8.7, the control of non-conforming outputs. And then basically having to do with internal and external audits, basically making sure that all of that record keeping is done and you are writing your non-conformances, you are writing your corrective actions if in fact you see something wrong within the quality system and within the traceability portion of your system in general. More specifically here, as it relates to Macola 10, as my colleagues have said before, the supply chain management, having those inventory controls, having the serial and lot traceability and reporting, having that RMA processing and traceability for warranties, and also having those service controls, manufacturing process controls, having that document management in the background, and various workflows, along with quality system controls, audit findings, that conformance management, and those corrective actions. So with that said, Nick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and I hope everyone was taking good notes. There was a lot of content there. This is the last slide here before we start wrapping up. It's recall, and I'm going to ask the panel to chime in on this as well. But first of all, you have traceability. Not having traceability data leaves you open to lawsuits and liabilities. It can also reduce or eliminate product recalls by helping to identify issues before the products even reach the consumers. If product recalls are required, all reliable and actionable traceability data must be immediately and easily available. And then, and last of all, it provides for better customer experience should a recall happen. Now, guys, what do you have to add? Can you add anything to this?
I think the data being at your fingertips and retrievable is very, very key here. If in fact, heaven forbid, a recall does happen, having that particular data and those particular data elements at your disposal very, very quickly so that you can respond to the recall is certainly something that is absolutely required.
I'd agree. Being able to know that you can do this effectively and quickly is key, and it's imperative for all the businesses that are involved with products like that, which are either affecting health or safety. So it's nice to know that the tools are there and in place to do what you need to. If, heaven forbid, something does happen, you get a bad product and it gets out the door.
Absolutely.
And I would only add is, and I think everybody who's on this call would probably recognize it, but just the seriousness of what it can do to a company. Just think about those companies that have been very publicly shamed by, delivering or product that's substandard, and what it's done to their reputation, what it's done to their business environment. So it's something to certainly not be taken lightly.
Absolutely. So, guys, I thank you again for joining us as we talk through these, knowing the product or component's location in the supply chain, accessing quality data on a product, enabling regulatory compliance, finding and communicating with consumers of the product, and that goes both ways, doesn't it? It could be, if it's a recall, or it could be beneficial as well, where people are looking for. I was in the store yesterday, and actually it was organic and it was traced all the way to the source, and that is beneficial for the consumer as well. So I didn't really talk much about Macola because we actually will have a demo coming up here on July 12th. Real quick, Macola's been around for over 40 years. During that time, over 8,000 customers have relied on Macola to run their businesses. Macola 10's our flagship product. It's all-inclusive and scalable, and we like to say it offers you strong value. And if you join us for the Macola 10 demo, we'll discuss a few of these things about it being all-inclusive, integrated functionality, configuration instead of customization. Out of the box is another way you can describe Macola 10. It also has automated workflows that increase efficiency. We'll talk about personalizable views into the data that matters to you, anytime, any device, and then flexible purchase options. So in the email we'll send out tomorrow with the link to view the on-demand webinar, we'll also include a link to see this demo for July 12th. We hope to see you there. A couple parting thoughts before we hit the questions. If you go to our website, to the resources section, we have a traceability ebook. There's an infographic on traceability as well. And look for these in the follow-up email. The demo is on the 12th. And then after this webinar, we'll have a survey. Want to get your feedback. So if you have questions, go ahead and start sending them in. Again, it's on the control panel to the right. Okay. First off, and panel, I'm going to open this up to you. Could you explain the differences between a lotted item and a serialized item?
I can take a crack at that. A serialized item, think of it in the context of a license plate that you have on your car. It would be a unique identifier to a single unit of inventory, of a certain item. A lot item, a lotted item, sometimes also referred to as a batch item, would be some quantity of a certain item that would all have a common identifier together, which would be a lot number or a batch number.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
I think a good example of lotting is if you have something like, let's say, a beverage, and it comes in, 100,000 gallons. That 100,000 gallons can be broken down to individual gallons, but they all came from the same lot, and yet those individual gallons could be serialized individually. So it's kind of grouping product, as Russ mentioned, that are of like consistency or have come in and been produced at the same time.
Okay. Okay. Well, here, let's move on to the next question. It's broad. What are the key steps to implementing traceability? Panel?
I think step number one, and I can share the other steps maybe with my other colleagues, is make sure you identify your objective. And hopefully with things you've learned in this webinar, you have an objective laid out in terms of what you want to trace. How far back do you want to trace things? What level of traceability you're going to need or want in finished goods, work in process level inventory, raw material inventories, and so forth. So I would say one of the best places to begin would be just laying out that objective in terms of what kind of information do you want to have easily and quickly available as it relates to tracing and tracking product, whether it's disposition and where it's shipped and who's using it, to tracking it throughout the process and so forth. Just lay out a very good objective.
Right, determining exactly what it is that needs to be either lotted or serialized is also important. A company may consider the liquid going into a bottle to be important to be lotted, but the bottle and its cap may not necessarily be.
I think also marking comes into play here, either physically stamping or handwriting or labeling or a variety of other things is very important. And I agree that actually defining what level of lot and or serial traceability that you actually need, whether or not it's at the raw material or the component or subassembly or finished good level and so on down the line, are very, very important.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're getting towards the end of our time here. If there are questions, please feel free to forward them to me afterwards. But I just want to thank everyone again for attending. We appreciate your time. We know it's valuable, and we appreciate you sharing with us today. If you do have any other questions, please contact me at nick.mears@exact.com. Also, once you leave today's webinar, you should be receiving a survey on the demo, and we really appreciate your feedback if you'd mind sharing it with us. Final note, we'll be emailing a link tomorrow to view this on demand, and as well as the ebook and the infographic that accompany this traceability topic. So thank you again for joining us, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.